Obviously, we're excited that Kansas State has a high seed in the dance, but what kind of disrespect does it take to make them a 5 seed? Are they not watching basketball?
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcat podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. Happy Monday. If you're listening to this with somebody else and they're not wearing green, you have my permission to give a little pitch. We are talking women's college basketball in this episode of Locked On Kansas State because Selection Sunday was yesterday, and Kansas State was given a 5 seed. They're not hosting. This will be a different type of college basketball tournament for them in comparison to, let's just say, last year. We will not have 2 games in Manhattan. They will travel to Lexington, Kentucky, and they will play starting on Friday, beginning against 12 seed Fairfield. We're going to dig into that. We're going to dig into what to expect moving forward throughout the rest of the week as we get to Friday. And then we're going to end today's show with a little bit of just Big 12 talk on the men's side and why expanding to 76 teams might not be a good idea for the conference and for Kansas State. And we're going to do that all in this episode. Before we do, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is perfect timing for that because you pick your brackets. There are plenty of bets that you can make on FanDuel. And I already did. I punched my ticket a month and a half ago, longer than that. I think I did it in 2024 for Kansas State to win it all, to win a national championship. I think our friends at FanDuel, when I punched my ticket, sitting in the middle console of my truck, so I don't even actually remember. But I think it's at 960 is my odds, plus 960. So, hey, it's a pretty penny if they find a way to get their first natty, but that won't mean anything in the world to me. It'll be a nice just consolation prize, but actually winning the national championship will be huge, will be absolutely huge for this university. But they got a tough spot to get there. They have a very tough spot, and dare I say, the toughest side of the bracket in all of the NCAA tournament. And the sad thing is, because they were moved to a 5 seed, they're seen as the top 5 seed, and it kind of didn't work in their favor. I would say that the South Carolina bracket, with them being the 1 seed, is probably the easier side if you had to pick a side. But overall, Kansas State will get the 5 seed. Ole Miss getting a 5th seed as well when they're sitting there waiting for Selection Sunday. We saw Ole Miss pop up on the screen as a 5 seed. I got really excited. I thought that Kansas State was going to sneak on in there and get the last one of the 4s. And we're going to be playing in Manhattan for 2 games and hopefully find our way either to Birmingham or Spokane, whatever regional we were going to be at for Sweet 16 play. Now, for the record, this team will play in Spokane, Washington, if they do make it through Lexington, Kentucky, starting on Friday. So it'll be a heck of a travel. Lexington, Kentucky is what, 10, 11 hours from Manhattan? And then it's a long way to get out to Washington. So something just to keep in mind on that one. But things changed when Maryland got that Final 4 seed. And Jeff Mittie said it in his press conference as well right after the Selection Sunday, talking about what he thought about, the seeding and stuff. He kind of said the same thing. He was excited about the fact that Ole Miss got a 5, thought there was a chance. But then when Maryland came in as a 4, he kind of knew that it wasn't going to go in their favor. And he mentioned the net rankings weren't as great as Kansas State. He didn't see them as a 4. He didn't see other media outlets predicting them as a 4. But unfortunately, that's how it turned out. And Kansas State will end with the 5 seed. They have a super tough path to reach the program's first national championship. That will begin in Lexington, Kentucky. The 4 seed Kentucky will host Kansas State, as well as the 2 opponents before potentially those 2 teams facing off in the round of 32. Kentucky's going to take on Liberty, which, I mean, that's a possibility for an upset right there. Liberty has some interesting shooters. They're a tough team. They are not a normal 13 seed in the mix. I think this is going to be a really tough regional for both of the top seeds with Kentucky and with Kansas State. Kansas State will meet Fairfield in the first round of 42. I want to dig into Fairfield in just a minute. We're going to do that on this episode because I do think that there's plenty to talk about with this team. And, you talk about the press conference, they haven't even had a chance to dig into it. Coach Mitty, Ayoka Lee, Sundell, Poindexter, they all said they really didn't know much about Fairfield. All they knew is they won games, and that's exactly what they did. We're going to dig into that in just a second. But not only is Kentucky in this bracket, that is probably the least of their concerns. Getting through Lexington is an absolute path. And although I'm saying that this team got screwed with their bracket pick, there's an absolute path for them to continue on and make a deep run and punch my ticket in that's sitting in my middle console as well. But it's going to be very tough. The first seed, USC, is in this bracket. UConn is the second seed. And then you have Oklahoma as the 3 seed as well, all in this bracket. So you have to make sure you get through not only Kentucky in Lexington, you got to take care of potentially USC in the Sweet 16, potentially UConn or Oklahoma in the Elite 8. And then you can get to the Final Four and worry about the other sides of the bracket. Now, I know eventually you'd have to beat some of those teams to make it to win the national championship. I understand that there are 68 teams in the field and only one national champion is crowned. I understand that 100%. But I also want to see this team go completely far as they possibly can go. We're talking about what this team has done at the beginning of the season, how hot they looked until Ayoka Lee got injured. Then there was this downside. There was a spark of momentum. Then she came back in the Kansas game. That momentum fell again when she was injured. Big 12 conference play or Big 12 tournament didn't go as planned. But the players said in the press conference they felt some kind of spark. So you got to think there's some momentum heading into this tournament. That momentum better be super high, because there is a tough path for them, not only to get out of the first weekend to find themselves in the Sweet 16, but when they do, when they get that far, when they travel to the West Coast, to Spokane, Washington, there's a good chance that the USC Trojans with Juju Watkins is going to be sitting there waiting for them. In this side of the bracket, you have arguably the 2 best players in all of college basketball right now. And unfortunately, I'm not talking about Serena Sundell and Ayoka Lee, although they are going to be most likely drafted if they both decide to put their name in the hat in the first round of the WNBA draft this year. But a player that will probably most likely be drafted 1-1 or the second overall pick in that draft is Paige Beckers of UConn. She's in this bracket. And when she's eligible in a few years, Juju Watkins will most likely be the first overall pick in the WNBA draft as well. This is going to be a very tough challenge. But did I ever say once that it's impossible? Absolutely not. This team has what it takes to make this deep run, to continue what they've accomplished and what they've built over these last couple of years. As long as they can find a way to limit distractions, which so far so good. Hopefully we can continue that way. I know there's been some side distractions of Coach Mitty talking about taking the Missouri job. There's been some talks online. Hopefully he squashed it already with his recent press conference saying he doesn't want to talk about any of this internet jargon. Hopefully that can continue throughout the week, throughout the mandatory press conferences during the NCAA tournament where you have to sit on the podium and answer questions in the locker room. With the fact that this team has the experience to handle this type of noise, to know what they're about to be in for because they've been here before. That's not something you can say about every other team in this tournament. That alone is a huge advantage for Kansas State, 100%. Let's dig into Fairfield and let's talk about how important it's going to be from practice that started from the end of the Big 12 tourney to heading up into playing Fairfield on Friday, how important it is to have Ayoka Lee back. Let's talk about that next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. Eating healthy doesn't have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are already ready to heat and ready to eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, and with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. Beyond just meals, uh, also it offers smoothies, breakfast, snacks, so you always have something nutritious to go. I love the smoothies. Try those out for sure. Eat smart with Factor. Get started with factormeals.com/Factor Podcast and use code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus shipping. That's code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. This episode is also sponsored by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made from the skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order parts and products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and their latest products info to get you help you need to get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. So join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, if you use promo code SH5, you'll get 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. For your second listen, and it's got to happen, folks, check out Locked On College Basketball. Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. March is here, so be the most informed college basketball fan throughout the madness. Find Locked On College Basketball on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. Again, just like this show, free and available everywhere. We're talking Locked On College Basketball. We're talking Locked On Kansas State on this show, and we're talking women's basketball because Kansas State picked for the 5 seed in the Spokane region, but they're going to head to Lexington, Kentucky first to take on Fairfield. The 12 seed Fairfield is not like your normal 12 seed. This team is really good, folks, and they have a couple teams on their resume that have proven that they can continue and play really good basketball. And Kansas State is not going to be their first Power 4 opponent of the season. They started off their non-conference play. They started off their season with a win against an SEC opponent. That's how they started their season. On November 4th, they beat Arkansas 81-67. It wasn't even a close game. They won by 14 points against an SEC opponent. The small little college in Fairfield, Connecticut, took down the Razorbacks. This is a team that Kansas State has to play round 1. And you think this path is going to be easy? I'm not even talking Kentucky, Oklahoma, UConn, or USC. Right now, I'm talking Fairfield. This team also only lost to 2 points to begin the season in their third game against Oklahoma State. They started the year 1-2. Remember how Serena Sundell and Coach Mitty said they didn't know much about this team, but they knew they won games? This team started 1-2. They finished the season 28-4. After that 1-2 start, they went 27-2 to finish the season. Absolutely incredible run for this team. And they have some really good players on this squad as well. And they probably have one of the most sought after coaches in all of women's college basketball, with all of the openings in all of the power conferences. Their head coach is already getting phone calls, and she's denied phone calls as well, which is very interesting to say the least. Badgeofhonor.com reported, and so did Talia Goodman of On3, that Fairfield head coach, Carly Thibault, who is the head coach of Fairfield, declined the opportunity to speak with Wisconsin and will not be their next head coach. She decided that she wants to stick where she's at. Now, that could be just the fact that she's waiting for a different type of job. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Carly Thibault, her father and her brother used to be the head coach / GM in the WNBA, most recently with the Washington Mystics. So if you are a fan of women's basketball, if you know much about the WNBA, that team recently won the WNBA championship just a few years ago with Ella Dawn, and her family was leading the charge as management and coach. So she comes from a very highly respected basketball family. And although you might have never heard from Fairfield, this is a really, really well-coached basketball team. So this is not something that Kansas State should look past, look for the round of 32. Although they're projected to win, if you look at the statistics and the projections, sure, fine, fantastic. But they were also projected to beat Colorado last year. Just putting that out there. And again, this is not to put out negative things, not to bring back things of reminders, but we have to be reasonable when we're having these conversations. Although I think this team can make a deep run into the NCAA tournament, and dare I say, find a way to win the program's first national championship, although they have a super tough schedule, one team's got to do it. Why can't it be Kansas State? Why can't it be a team that finds a way to beat Juju Watkins of USC, to take down Paige Beckers of UConn, if that happens, if that so be is the path? Why not Kansas State? But there's also a possibility that they go home on Friday, pack their bags after being in Lexington for a day, and head on back and finish it up and look forward to next season. That's just the beauty of this tournament. That has nothing towards this team right now. But without Ayoka Lee, we have seen some ups and downs with this squad. But according to Ayoka, she says that she feels 100% and ready to go. Now, Coach Mitty had a little bit of pushback in that in his press conference, said that she's probably going to need some rest, pointed to her conditioning a little bit. But he said that's up to him. That's going to be his choice to make more opportunities to rest her, get her out just before the media timeouts or just before the quarter ends, so her rest periods don't affect live basketball play. So I don't expect her to play any less than 30 minutes still, as long as there's a fight in the basketball game. I mean, you got to remember, this is no longer an opportunity for the save Ayoka Lee for another moment. There is no other moments for Serena Sindel, for Ayoka Lee. When they lose, if they lose, it's over. Their careers are finished at Kansas State. That is very bittersweet. But that's just how it goes. So there's no waiting. It's up to her of how long she wants to be on that court. And I have a feeling that Coach Mitty's not going to take her out if she's cooking. So let's just hope that's the case. Hopefully that she can change the way that Kansas State has played over the past couple weeks without her. Now, they've already said during practice they felt a huge spark, a huge momentum shift. They're really excited to have her back, and I'm sure that's the case. Having Kennedy, having Amani Lester step up and do big things in her absence, I think is only going to be better for this entire team. It'll bring me back that nice warm and fuzzy I had before the Ayoka Lee injury earlier in the season, when I felt like this team never really had a starting five. It was almost like, or should I say, it didn't feel like they had a rotation. It felt like just a second set of starters. It was a really good feeling of how much depth they had. I think we're starting to see that again, and what a perfect time to have that moment when you're getting ready to play do or die NCAA tournament play with the chance of just getting a few more wins. Yeah, it's a winning streak. You can't lose any. But just a few more wins gets you in a chance to participate to win your first national championship as a program and as a university. I mean, count me in. I mean, and what better team would you rather have right now? I know the men's team had a rough go, and dare I say, with all the transfers that came in and they're taking a different route, I would love to see this women's team check that box first before the men's team, because how long these players have stayed, how long these seniors, especially Serena Sandell and Ayoka Lee, have been around this program, it would feel a lot better. I think it would have more of an impact if they were able to do it. And they're the next one in line. So hopefully that can happen moving forward. Again, that game is going to be on Friday. I don't think the time has set yet. Actually, I did see one report that it said 2:30 tip-off Central Time. So that's not confirmed. That was on a social media post. But I do think it is 2:30 Central Time. But double check to make sure. Don't quote me on that one. Let's dig into one more topic before we leave today. Let's switch a little bit. Let's go to the men's side. Really, this is a both side. This is a men's and women's basketball conversation. But with a certain team in the Big 12, West Virginia, being snubbed out of the men's bracket, I think Commissioner Brett Yormark needs to change his way of thinking about what he should decide or what he should agree upon about possibly wanting to expand the tournament, the 76 teams. We'll finish that up right here on Locked On Kansas State. Today's episode of Locked On Kansas State is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet hits. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything, from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them when the spreads, the totals, or game props this year. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel.com.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, has come out recently and said he is in favor of expanding the NCAA tournament to 76 teams. And that might not seem like a lot. Now, the number 76 sounds insane, right? It does sound insane. When you think of other tournaments like the NIT, the WNIT, those are only 32. I mean, the NCAA tournament expanded from 64 to 68 just a few years ago with the whole first four in Dayton for the men's side. So moving to 76 teams would only expand to another 8 teams. So you'd really only add a couple extra on each side of the bracket. I don't know if that's a good choice now. And honestly, I don't know if it was ever a good idea. But I think the idea of Brett Yormark, why he was in favor of it, is because he thought that it would help the Big 12 get maybe 1 or 2 more schools into the mix. Now, for the record, Kansas State was on the bubble for quite some time until they lost some of those games on the West Coast to BYU. Really, that one didn't affect them, but the loss to Utah threw them off the bubble. And then when you get the losses to Arizona State later on in Manhattan, that kind of sealed the deal and took them off it for good. With 76 teams, I think we would have still been talking about Kansas State being on the potential bubble while we were in the Big 12 tournament because of all of their ranked wins. So if that was a possibility today, if we had 76 teams with yesterday's selection Sunday, I think we might be talking Jerome Tang's Kansas State team being in the tournament. But in big picture things, I don't know if that is actually going to be a favorable thing for Kansas State and for the Big 12 conference as a whole. Let me explain. West Virginia was absolutely robbed of getting in of the field of 68 over UNC, North Carolina Tar Heels, and I think Xavier as well. I don't think Xavier belonged there over at least West Virginia. Now, you can make other arguments for some of the other teams that were left out, but I don't understand how West Virginia was left out over a team like North Carolina, who only had one quad win all season long. That one quad win was against UCLA. And if you go back and watch that UCLA North Carolina game, UCLA basically handed them the win. I mean, they turned it over at the end. It wasn't a impressive, convincing win for the Tar Heels to get their one and only quad one win. And put that in perspective, I mean, Kansas State had multiple quad one wins this year, and we didn't think Kansas State was the best team. I know that everybody on social media is talking about how this team really just needs to change their whole focus and find a way to get better, and we're talking about a North Carolina team that easily found themselves in the NCAA tournament. So I get why Brent Yormark wants to move to a 76 field. I get it, because he wants to find a way to get maybe one or two more Big 12 teams into the mix, because once you're in the dance, you never know what can happen. You never know. We've seen teams go from the first four all the way to the final four. We've seen 16s beat 1 seeds. We've seen that happen. But I think it's going to continue to benefit those two conferences, the SEC and the Big 12, just a little bit more than they already are. I don't think it's going to help the other conferences, and there is not going to let or help any of those mid-major conferences anymore. So now you're going to have 76 teams, and you're still going to have plenty of those smaller conferences with one bid. And I think that just hurts college basketball a little more. Going back to that quad one conversation, why I think West Virginia should have got in. And I'm a Big 12 believer. I've said this on the show. Why are we talking West Virginia? Well, this comes hand in hand with Kansas State. This is the Big 12. This is your conference. You want as many representatives at the table, even if you're not one of those representatives, because it helps your conference expand and grow and get more love and support. And this is for every sport, not just basketball, not just football, but every sport. But West Virginia had more quad one wins. They had 6. Than North Carolina did, than Xavier did, than San Diego State did. All 3 of them are in the first 4 out, and we'll be playing in Dayton this week. All 3 of those teams only had 5 quad one wins all season. West Virginia had 6, and somehow they are not in the tournament. Now, we can have a conversation why North Carolina's athletic director is on the board of committee for the selection or the selection committee. That could be a possibility why the Tar Heels are in. We could say that, and I don't know if it'd get us anywhere. But I think there is some needs for change. There's absolutely some need for change. And if that's expanding to the number of 76, fine. I don't think that's the right move. I think the right move is either eliminating, I don't know if that's the right move, eliminating conference tournaments of some of these bigger conferences, or, I mean, we saw 14 SEC teams get into the tournament. So many at-large bids. The 2 conferences that had the most at-large bids, can you guess? SEC and Big 10. When is the media bias going to stop? When is it going to stop? Big 12 was 3rd, by the way, with 7 bids. Would have been tied with the Big 10 if they let West Virginia in. Was that the reason they left them out? Because they wanted to make sure that Big 10 and SEC were 1-2, big dogs at the table? I mean, is it that simple? Is that why they wanted to make it happen? Who knows? Either way, it can't happen. It can't happen. When you see teams like Texas, which I've talked about before, with their conference schedule, not conference schedule, what their record was in conference. I mean, you have a losing record in conference, no matter what conference you're in, unless you win the whole tournament and run it and find a way to just steal it as a bid. If you have a losing record in your conference, you should not be seen as an at-large bid, no matter what conference it is, Big 12 included. It just shouldn't be a thing. I don't think it would help the Big 12 if they expanded to 76 teams. I don't think it helped the ACC, although the ACC was in luck this time with North Carolina. It wouldn't help the mid-majors. It would only help the SEC and the Big Ten get a couple more in to help their media pals continue on and keep banking the dough, which is wild to say because the Big 12 and the ESPN have a deal, but you would never notice based on the type of attention those other two conferences get. Insane. We'll be back with more tomorrow as we continue on this path of covering Kansas State Wildcats every single day of the week. You don't want to miss this, so be sure to hit subscribe. We got plenty more to talk about. We are going to be here every single day. We're not going anywhere. Locked On Kansas State is here, and we are very close to 700 subscribers, so make sure you click subscribe. Be one of the first 1,000 subscribers on this adventure because, again, we just started, folks. We haven't even got to a full football season of this show. So just wait. We're going to talk plenty football this week, plenty college basketball. We got some recruits to talk about, so much to talk about. And of course, we got those women basketball team coming up on Friday. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.